I'm going to talk on a subject which isn't very relishable unless you take pleasure in the sufferings of others, which is just the opposite quality of a Vaishnava. I'll talk more later why I'm talking about this at all. It's the fall of Harikesa Swami, who was a huge figure, the biggest in ISKCON at the time probably. It's hard to say exactly. At the time that he fell down in 1999, in which his fall down, which it wasn't an overnight thing, but it became fully manifest, his fall down from Krishna consciousness. It's long enough after the event now to look back at it in a somewhat objective way, and it may stir nostalgia, anger. Definitely, I think everyone who's involved, regret will be there. But there are some things to be learned from that. I just came across a video on YouTube, where else, called A Few Glimpses into the Life of Harikesa Swami. And I decided to watch it, even though it's little more than an hour long, because I'm interested in ISKCON history, not just out of curiosity, but I want to learn the dynamics of this movement and what motivates people and where we've gone wrong and how we can improve things. I'm very deeply involved in ISKCON. I'm very concerned with it as a participant, and it's fascinating and it's essential, because if any movement is going to fully fulfill Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's prediction of chanting of Hare Krishna in every village, which hasn't fully happened yet, then it's got to be ISKCON. At least there's no sign of any movement coming even close to the potential of ISKCON. So watching that video brought back memories of an era which the end of it marked a watershed in the turbulent history of ISKCON. The film was made in 1998, just a year or so before the cataclysmic events of 1999. So Harikesa Swami, he's the central topic of this talk, although really the central topic of all our talks is Krishna, but he was doing such service for Krishna. So directly or indirectly, we're going to be thinking about Krishna, because we're talking about him in relation to his service to Krishna. And it really was exceptional. That can't be denied unless you're extremely envious. He was a highly intelligent, expert manager. He was also, but not a manager only, but he was really what Prabhupada wanted. He wanted spiritual leaders, not just managers. He gave spiritual direction to others. He had been personal secretary of Srila Prabhupada, traveling with him. You can hear him in quite a few of the morning walk conversations with Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada used to heavily chastise him, which doesn't mean that he was wrong. Doesn't mean there was something intrinsically wrong with him. Usually the devotees who Srila Prabhupada strongly chastised were devotees who Srila Prabhupada trusted to be able to take that chastisement. And one reason he got chastised was because he often, in the conversations, Harikesa would take the position of the devil's advocate. He was very intelligent, and he came up with all kinds of arguments that atheists would make, and Srila Prabhupada would cut him like anything. But but also for on a personal level also, Prabhupada, as Harikesha himself related later, Prabhupada threw him out from his service. Why are you sitting here typing? Why are you rotting just typing for me? You could be doing so much more. And Harikesha, he related later, he couldn't understand why Prabhupada, all Harikesha wanted to do, he said, was I wanted to be with Prabhupada and dictate transcribe his dictation and act as his secretary. I was quite happy like that, but he threw me out and forced me into the preaching field. And he didn't understand till later. He also described in his candid way how he envied Harishori Prabhu, but it wasn't a kind of envy out of malice, but as it happened, Srila Prabhupada, as with everyone, Srila Prabhupada is after all a person, transcendental person no doubt, but a person. There's certain people that Prabhupada got on very well with, very naturally with, and Harishori was like that. Prabhupada and Harikesha described, would sit and chat with each other, but he was more stiff with Harikesha. Nevertheless, Srila Prabhupada described Harikesha as the dearest grandson of Bhaktisiddhanta, because after Srila Prabhupada threw him out, he made him GBC in a very difficult zone in Germany, which was in a state of, the movement there was in a state of disarray and devastation due to court case and terrible publicity against the devotees. Devotees were disappointed, downcast. And then he had the zone of Scandinavia, where Srila Prabhupada himself said in Sweden that it's going to be very difficult to make devotees here. People are very impersonalistic by their whole outlook on life, their whole attitude. So and then of course, then he had the whole of Eastern Europe and the Soviet Union, which was behind the Iron Curtain at the time, which means very difficult to penetrate, very dangerous to go there. Harikesha loved it. He loved the risk and the excitement and the adventure, but it was a real risk. It's not like taking a risk in a game of poker or a video game or something like that. It was a real risk, and devotees in the Soviet Union, some of them were actually killed by the KGB. So and many, or quite a few, were tortured and this and that. And Harikesha, one time when he was in Russia, the KGB found out and they wanted to arrest him, and it's a whole story how ultimately they didn't, and he got out. So he started to do tremendous. I mean, he began a service in that zone, picking it up, re-inspiring devotees, getting them back on track, taking the responsibility, by which Prabhupada called Harikesha the dearest grandson of Bhaktisiddhanta, and that service which he began in that zone shortly before Srila Prabhupada left. I think it must have been around 1975 or 1976, and he increased it exponentially after Srila Prabhupada left. That zone was making so many devotees, and particularly producing and distributing books phenomenally. Harikesha took very seriously Prabhupada's order to translate all of the books. So he did it in his zone. He emphasized book production. They made a book production. They streamlined it. He was able to attract many highly intelligent people to join his mission. in that area, and some were translating, and then they had computerized, centralized book production. It was all very efficient. He was an excellent manager. One of the things he did was cutting edge technology. He had really brainy people who did all kinds of, had made technological innovations. If it had been running he could have been, the ability that he manifested, he could have been some Bill Gates or Steve Jobs or something like that. So you can imagine, it was quite a figure. We don't have anyone in the movement just like that at the present time. But over and above all this, being a phenomenal leader, he always tried to stay as a human, in the sense that not to get high airs about himself. In the beginning, when there was worship of the gurus, he never liked it. I remember the first time I met him, it must have been 1975. I was alone with him in the accounts office, because I happened to be the accountant at Bhaktivedanta Mana. And somehow I was alone with him there, and here he is. I'm just a new Bhakti. I might have been even before my initiation, either shortly before or after my first initiation. And here he is. I think at that time he hadn't taken sannyas. I'm not sure. He was a new sannyasi. And he was just talking with me for quite some time in a very friendly way, as if we were just very equal or something like that. And then later I met him down in New Zealand. And we talked for quite some time in a very open, and just me and him, very open and friendly. He's a huge, big figure. I hadn't taken sannyas at that time. And what I felt later, I thought that he's on a big pedestal, everyone looking up to him, and he just wants to have some friends, and it's difficult to be in that position all the time. And he really just liked to be friendly with everyone. And you can see on the video how he was concerned about the devotees. He had affection for them, and he wanted to share himself. He took the role. He didn't shirk his responsibilities as a leader by any means, but he was very concerned with sharing himself with his disciples and with his godbrothers. I was serving in Prabhavishnu Swami's subzone under Jayapataka Maharaj. Later Prabhavishnu became a GBC. I was in Bangladesh and Thailand and all these obscure places which there's nothing hardly going on at all in those places at that time. It's developed after I left. That was the key. So, and here he was, big acharya of his zone. And my perspective from afar, distance-wise, and in terms of the kind distance, also not only physical distance, but in a different part of ISKCON, which was going on in a different way and a different level, and also distance. He was so big, and I was just some unknown brahmachari and just fiddling around in some parts of the world people had never even heard of. So my perspective, and I dare say that it was similar to many godbrothers who weren't in his zone, was appreciation and awe mixed with discomfort also, because his zone was the last bastion of zonal acharyism in the West. Kirtananda had already fallen down. It's still going on in India up to the present day to quite some extent. Zonal, maybe in other places, but especially in India. And the Zonal acharyism had been modified somewhat by his making some of his godbrothers who had been faithfully serving with him all these years, he'd made them start to accept disciples also. But it was clear he was Sri Vishnupad, as he was known, even though by that time such honorifics were not allowed to be used, but he was still known as that. Although actually, according to Shastra, such honorifics are standard. Anyway, he was known as Sri Vishnupad, and the others who were initiating in his zone, his godbrothers, they were also looked up to, but nothing like himself. So it was a little, appreciation, but mixed with a little discomfort. His followers, his disciples, they had tended to have a somewhat fanatical loyalty bordering on fanaticism, which he didn't encourage, but at the same time he did want to keep his group tightly together and keep focused, and it was groupish, you could say. And I guess that's inevitable if you become a powerful guru. And somewhat arrogance among his followers, which I guess is understandable when, especially in Europe, the rest of Europe was all devastated after the departure of Bhagavan, and his zone is going on so well, and America having so many problems, and most of the world. But then his zone is just booming, so it's not surprising. His zone was outstanding, but anyway, it was about to change. One thing featured on that video is his rock music bhajans, which I personally didn't like at all. Sorry. His disciples, I think he and his disciples were the only ones who liked it. And although many were sold for making profit to the public, now I don't think, and no one listens to his music now, which means that he didn't have any personal merit, but he was able to indulge in his desire to be something like a rock star by being a guru, and in this way he indulged in that. But I didn't. I still feel that the bhajans of the Vaishnava acharya should be sung in a manner which reflects the mood of those songs. He had the Shad Goswami Ashtam, Krishna, Kirtana, Gana, Nar. It's real rasa bas, this heavy rock kind of sound with the songs. Anyway, that's just one of the things. At that time, it must have been 1999, that the GBC made him chairman for 3 years, which was unprecedented. Srila Prabhupada had set up the system that the chairman should be there for 1 year and then change, rotating every 1 year. I thought this was very inauspicious because it was against Prabhupada's instruction. And I thought it was too much power for one, concentrated in one devotee. And it would be too much pressure. I was wondering if he can take it. And within 1 year, within a few months of his being appointed in that role, he was gone. We later learned that more than once he'd begged the GBC to let him marry. He was doing great, but it was the great strain. He needed to marry. He knew it himself, but the GBC wouldn't let him. And there are many other weird things about him, which we got to hear about his fascination with UFOs, and he was a bit cranky, to say the least, and thinking the world was going to be invaded, and spending a lot of money on making nuclear shelters against huge amounts of money making nuclear shelters against the nuclear war, which didn't happen. And later, we heard from the disciples, well, why didn't you... The GBC and probably his godbrothers who were in his zone, they knew about all these things, or at least some of them. And the disciples later said, well, why didn't you tell us before? Why did you allow this to go on? Remembering this, at one point, I myself made what in retrospect I guess was a mistake. I came out publicly against one of my godbrothers who was weird, you could say, writing all really strange things in his books and saying that he's getting knowledge from contact with a level of cosmic consciousness and knowledge from a previous life. In other words, special knowledge that he has special access to. And when he says knowledge, he's talking about completely speculative things like motherships coming from Mu, and he's publishing this in books. I did speak to this godbrother. He wasn't respond. Anyway, it's a whole history. But what I learned from that is that why didn't the GBC or anyone else tell anyone? Why did they allow it to go on when they knew that it looked very good, and in many ways it was very good? Huge numbers of books being produced, huge numbers of books being distributed. So the movement was powering ahead, especially in the communist countries, ex-communist countries, but it was all based on a weak basis, which was Harikesa Swami. Oh, he looked strong, but he wasn't. Why did they allow this? And in retrospect, with my experience of trying to, I thought, well, this is crazy. Why don't we just say something? And surely everyone will agree this is nonsense. But no. Some people, they get too big, and you can't say anything about them, and it won't be accepted, even if it should be obvious according to the philosophy of Krishna consciousness. You can't say it. It won't be accepted. And it's going on to the present day. There are things which, if we neutrally, objectively study the teachings of Srila Prabhupada, there are things going on up to the present day which should not be done, clearly should not be done, but is done by people who are so big, you can't say, there's so much invested in them, so many disciples, so much faith invested in them, that nonsense things go on, and just, you can say something, but it won't be accepted. You will be blamed. So anyway, I digress a bit. Getting back to this story. What was going on? Among other things, his sadhana was getting worse. He had chronic illness, which he couldn't find out the cause for it. He was trying so many different kinds of treatments, color treatments, and then he was getting into weird things, pendulums to try to understand what's going on, color treatment, and all kinds of new age therapies. His sadhana was getting worse as he was taking so much pressure of management, and then his sadhana getting worse because his having difficulty due to his sickness. No one could say what the sickness is. It was probably just all the stress and the strain of he was a workaholic, the stress and the strain, and then the dichotomy within himself. On the one hand, he wanted to be a devotee. On the other hand, he was beginning to get doubts, and he had so many repressed material desires. One thing he got into, which was clearly nonsense, at least I and quite a few others at the time understood, was clearly nonsense, was that there was some disciple of Jayapataka Maharaj from Orisha who claimed to catch ghosts in little pots. And he said that he removed ghosts from peoples and from properties, and he would tell people, you have 3 ghosts in you, you have a ghost in you. And so many devotees thought, oh, I have all these bad desires in me. Maybe it's a ghost. Maybe I'll have this devotee, or whatever you want to call him, I'll have him remove my ghost. So Harikesa was really into this. He thought, great, we have so many problems, it's all the ghosts. So they brought him over and spent huge amounts of money, because they had lots of money, making lots of money. They gave huge amounts of money to Mayapur. He got involved in Mayapur also. That was he funded, a lot of money went into Mayapur. He got the book distribution going in Mayapur on a big scale, which has been going on ever since, so that's to his credit. So on the one hand, he was doing good things. On the other hand, he had this ghost, we used to call it ghost busting, nonsense. And people were becoming ghost conscious instead of Krishna conscious. And then there was, throughout his zone, he had all these tantric yagyas going on by this supposed ghost catcher. One thing this ghost catcher did was he gave Harikesa some medicine, which we call vibhuti, some kind of tantric medicine or something, supposed to be. Because he'd tried so many kinds of treatments and he couldn't find out what was wrong with him. Headache, backache, this, that, and the other. Weakness. And later on, it was after all the dust started settling, after Harikesa really went nuts, it was found out that one of the ingredients of this so-called vibhuti is a term used, it's actually used by, among others, Sai Baba followers use it for the ash which manifests from pictures of him, so we're told. So one of the ingredients of this vibhuti was a highly powerful psychotropic drug which is used for the treatment of persons with mental disorders of the kind that Harikesa was exhibiting. And so that was a great mystery, how this ghost buster could know that he had could analyze such a disease and know which kind of medicine to give. Allopathic medicine, there's nothing to do with traditional Indian tantrism or any such thing. He didn't tell Harikesa he was giving him some heavy psychotropic drug. And as the result of it, Harikesa became more and more weird. The medicine was supposed to cure his weirdness. And if he stopped taking it for some time, then because the effect of this drug, now I'm just saying what I remember, but it's patchily, it is the story. I just saw the video 2 days ago, and I haven't investigated deeply. I'm just giving some idea of what's going on. It was getting really, really weird and wild, but from the outside it all looked good. So if the effect of this drug is if you suddenly stop taking it, you become, it can help to suppress certain symptoms. I don't know, psychotropic means you get all kinds of weird ideas and hallucinations. But anyway, if you stop taking it, then you really go nuts. So some other major things to be said is that Harikesa had disciples in Russia who were, some of them were getting involved in the stock market and shares or something like that. Big money, big money they were making. He was getting big money from some businesses they were doing, and mixed up with the mafia or something. I don't know exactly, but at one point he invested a huge amount of money, some millions of dollars. This is how we've heard the story. And it was gone. And that was the breaking point for him. Other things going on, he was taking treatment from a New Age healer, a woman who he wanted to marry. She didn't want to marry him. At one point, among other weird things, he declared himself to be Skanda, the god of war. Then it just, after he lost all the money, then that was it. He snapped. Devotees had entrusted him with money from business. He invested. I don't know who advised him to do it. And as often happens in this speculative stock, whatever it is, I don't exactly, but it was gone. And he was gone. Then the madness became more and more apparent. Exactly the details I don't remember. It was a very confused time. But what was going on? He was working hard. He was a workaholic. He told his disciples to. You can see it in that video, telling them to work hard. He wasn't after money for his own sake. He wasn't after money for sense gratification. He was making money for Krishna. He wanted to use it for developing Mayapur and so many other things. He wasn't after name and fame or any such thing. But when he got these things, he wasn't able to handle it, and he was destroyed by them. He was really trying to do his best sincerely to please Srila Prabhupada and Krishna. Maybe another reason I can speculate that he was a workaholic is we hear that people who are workaholics, they're often like that because they're trying to cover up part of their psyche, which they don't want to face. They may have traumatic experiences or whatever. So I can speculate that he was working so hard to try to cover up his material desires, which were coming up more and more also. And then working more and more, then a decreasing taste for hearing and chanting about Krishna. That also because of his chronic sickness. He was less able to hear and chant about Krishna, to chant properly or nicely, and eventually, and another factor was, there was the whole GBC, which is always difficult to be a GBC member. There's so many things going on which are difficult to handle. And plus you're criticized by so many. His success also led to many critics, and eventually he just collapsed under the strain of work and the strain of everything, stress. And he went mad. I think we can safely say that, clinically mad, and spiritually went mad, also started speaking badly about Srila Prabhupada, blaming his problems on Srila Prabhupada. again, I can speculate that he lost faith in Krishna consciousness. I can speculate he didn't he couldn't work it out how he had tried so hard, but he hadn't. Still, he was collapsing. He tried so hard to serve Srila Prabhupada's mission, but he was going down spiritually. Well, a reason for that is there is a process. We are also warned against atyahara prayasascha, making too much endeavor, more than we can handle. So we are warned that whatever happens, you have to keep steady in your sadhana. Anyway, tyaktva sadharamang charanam bhujam hare bhajanda pakvo tapatet tato yadi yatra kavava bhadrama buddhamu shakim kovarta apto bhajatang swadharma. Even if someone performs all their duties religiously, very well, but doesn't become attached to Krishna, ultimately it's useless. But if someone leaves all those good things of the world, being a good person, and tries to surrender to Krishna, but doesn't completely perfect and falls down on the path, still such a person is glorious. Navaijano jatu katanchana vrajen mukun smaran mukun angri upaguhanam puna. A devotee may fall down, but he's never lost to Krishna. But the result, ironically, you'll find in that video him giving a talk to devotees who are all very attentively and faithfully listening to him. Don't fall down, he's saying. Don't go away. Ironic, huh? Just a short time after that, he fell away, and then just almost overnight his whole zone fell apart. Most of the devotees blooped. They left Krishna consciousness quickly. I mean, devotees do go away. There is a turnover rate. But many, I suppose their whole Krishna consciousness was completely centered on him, focused on him, with faith in him. And when he went away, they went away. Some stayed on the properties, but took over the properties. They became the legal owners of them, so I'm told. Russia became a very big problem for the ISKCON management after Harikesha's going away, because the Russian disciples, despite Harikesha's going away from Krishna consciousness, the leading disciples there, most of them, they really didn't have much idea of Krishna consciousness. One of them says in the video that we didn't have books. We had the Hare Krishna mantra, and we had Harikesha's songs, his rock music, and that was the basis. They hardly had any books, and so that was the basis of their Krishna consciousness, which is not on a very strong basis. So they remained fanatically attached to him, and the huge property they had in St. Petersburg that remained with them. And actually it's only because Bhakti Goswami, who was Vaidyanath Das at the time, he was leading devotee in Russia there at the time, because he had the good sense, because he actually studied philosophy, he was translating books. He didn't go along with Harikesha. If he had gone with the other group, then we don't know what the fate of the movement in Russia would be. It would have been totally lost at the time. Another interesting thing from that video is Brahmananda Puri, who is, I think that was his name, a big figure of ISKCON Russia at the time, Harikesh followers, saying how Harikesh, when one time he came to Russia, I guess it was Moscow. Yeah, it was Moscow. And at night, after he came back from the program and said, I'd like to take hot milk now, can you bring it now? And they were all disorganized and they hadn't any milk for him, so they went out to try to find some milk. But the situation in Moscow at the time was that if you wanted milk, you had to buy it in the morning, and there was no milk available in the evening. They went door to door asking people if they had milk, and they didn't, so they went out and they were trying to get milk. They couldn't find milk anywhere. They came to some hotel. They thought it might be in there, and the people seeing them in dhotis. This was after Glasnost, must be. They could go around as devotees, dressed in dhotis. They treated them very rudely. But one man in the hotel said, "Do you want milk? Moloko." Russian word for milk, moloko. "Do you want milk?" "Yeah? Okay, I have some milk. You come to my room in the hotel. I'll give you." And he gave them a bottle of milk. And he told them, "I bought this milk this morning and put it in the fridge in my room. I don't know why I bought it. Since I was 1 year old, I never drank milk in my life. But when I woke up this morning, something urged me, buy milk, buy milk. And I couldn't understand why. And all day I was thinking, why? Why did I buy this milk? What am I going to do with it?" And I left it in the fridge. And now that I understand that you religious people have come and you want milk, it must be some inspiration from God. So these things happened and do happen to people who dedicate their lives to Krishna. And in other faiths also, these kind of miracles happen. And although the scientists may ignore it, so miracles will happen. It's a small thing, getting some milk, but it shows the hand of Krishna in the lives of someone who's endeavoring to serve him. As long as he was endeavoring in that way, really putting himself out for Krishna, and Krishna reciprocated. Another time I heard he was on a flight from, I believe it was Frankfurt to Chicago, and the plane was having problems in midair, and they had to make an emergency landing, and the plane was coming down almost vertically, and everyone was screaming, and he was chanting out loudly, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. The plane landed, and it came down heavily on its wheels and bounced up in the air. He was a good storyteller, Harikesa, a very dramatic way he'd tell the stories. But it was a very dramatic scene. Bounced in the air, and they were all waiting for it to burst into flames. It came down again and on the ground and bounced up again, and eventually after a few bounces it came to steadiness, and everyone sighed a sigh of relief. And I thought, and I suppose others who thought when he related this, as he was telling in a class, Krishna saved that plane because he was in it. So such things happened. They can happen. We don't find anyone today taking such risks for Krishna or taking such heavy responsibility at that level. But the Krishna conscious movement goes on. No one's indispensable. Why talk on this at all? It might not seem to be very inspiring. Not inspiring, but it's educational. We should be aware the pitfalls that are there. We should learn. If we're not happy in Krishna consciousness, there's no use to fake it. We should make some adjustment in our life. Of course, Harikesa wanted to make the adjustment, but he wanted to get married. He wasn't allowed to. So other things we can learn. Now I'm going to come into another phase of the talk, things that we can learn from this. I actually came across something else also. I'd had it for some time. Lessons to be learned from the Harikesa episodes. Hoping for problems to go away doesn't always work. That was true for Harikesa, personally, individually. And the GBC were also, what are we going to do? He's going on, as far as it looks good and it's going on well, and if he marries it'll be a major embarrassment, and So many devotees may lose faith. If he had married that, no doubt it would have been a major embarrassment, and so many devotees would have lost faith. But it wasn't as bad as the terrible fall. It could have been managed, you could say. But it was just wild what happened after he left in that state of mind. It was, in retrospect, you could say it was very cruel on him to force him to go on like that. So things are really getting problematic. We may have to make some major adjustment. Other things to learn. Faith is very powerful. The faith in him. The devotees, they worked so hard. They gave themselves. They took tremendous risks. Some of them died in Russia, as I'd mentioned. Their faith in Krishna consciousness, which was focused on him. On what he wanted to be. He wanted to be the servant of Prabhupada and do his duty to help others to follow that path. Unfortunately, their faith, although it was very powerful and contagious, it wasn't on a very solid basis. Many lessons to be learned from this. Our faith ultimately, it's in Guru, Sadhu and Shastra, in Krishna, Hari, Guru and Vaishnavas. Since the inception of this movement by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, there have been gurus going away. Probably not to the extent that we have seen in ISKCON, but it's been there. It's discussed in Krishna Bhajan Amrit by Narahari Sharka. So we can, one of the associates of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, so we can understand it's been going on and it is going on. So we should have full faith in Guru, but it should be with some qualification also, that he should be a Guru. Do what he's supposed to do. I would say if someone's so sick and this and that they're not able to do their sadhana, then the disciples and others should make some adjustment and relieve of the work duties so they can do their sadhana nicely. If they're so sick that they can't do sadhana properly, then they shouldn't pile any more stress on them. If they're going to be a spiritual leader, then first they have to get strength daily from sadhana. An obvious thing to learn from this, but the only thing we learn from history is that we never learn anything from history. Well, which I'm relating this so we can try and learn some things. Obviously, we should never think that we're too advanced to fall into Maya. Srila Prabhupada himself said that I pray daily to Krishna that I not fall into Maya. Be careful, be careful. Kshurasya dhara nishita duratyaya durgang patas tat kavayo vadanti. Spiritual life is like a razor's edge. It's a difficult path, say the wise. Be careful. Be careful what we let our mind go toward, what we let our mind contemplate. Actually, even that horrible rock music he did, that in itself, that's a sign that something's not quite right. Why should we be attracted to such horrible music? It's the music style of the demons, actually. Very aggressive, in the lower modes of nature. Something wrong there. We may try to dovetail it in Krishna's service, but intrinsically, it's not uplifting. Yeah, that I was saying about sadhana. We work, yeah, but not at the expense of our sadhana. Don't become so involved in management and headaches and solving problems. I am the problem solver. Imagining ourselves as a great hero, hanging on to management until the last moment of death. Sadhana should come first. Otherwise, we're not even going to remember why we're doing what we're doing, and then we'll do it for other reasons. Sannyas, oh, that's a big question. Who should take sannyas? It's hard to say. Prabhupada gave Harikesa sannyas. He gave sannyas to so many young men. That's called what is it called? Battle, I can't remember the word. Battle appointment, something like that. In which, in the battlefield, if the general is and the senior officers are killed, but the army is still ready to battlefield commission, then one of the officers may say, "Hey, you, Private so-and-so, now you're a lieutenant general." He promotes him on the spot because we need someone to do the job. He may not be fully qualified, but he's enthusiastic and he's dedicated, and he has some idea of what he's doing. So in the same way, battlefield commission, Prabhupada gave young men sannyas who may not have been fit for it. There's no need to repeat that at the present time. The lizard agrees, maybe he was a fallen sannyas. We don't know. Sannyasi is obvious. It should be obvious. But somehow or other, it's when the message is not... Especially devotees in India, at least people can understand. Sannyasis don't associate with women. They don't get this New Age healer woman was massaging Harikesa. Sannyasi is crazy. At least in India, up to the present day, India may be fallen in so many ways and materialistic. People can understand women, sannyasis. they may have women disciples. They may be. Like a father figure to their women disciples. There has to be distance. Don't come very close. Alone with women, not allowed. Don't do that. Don't be stupid. Tantricism, this should be obvious. Keep a long way from tantricism, anything to do with ghosts and all. They just forget it all. Chant Hare Krishna. You could maybe wear a Nrsimha Kavacha or something like that also. But Vaishnava solutions, if we're going to look for solutions in the material world, just like people go to astrology and the astrologer tells them, worship this demigod. Vaishnavas don't do that. We can worship different forms of Vishnu from whom those demigods take power, just like we say about Ganesh. Yat pada pallava yugang vinithaya kumbha danve pranama sagan danve pranama samaye saganadi rajaha vignan vihantamalamazdya jagatrayasya govindamadi purusham tamaham bhajami. I worship Nrsimhadev by holding on his head the lotus feet of Nrsimhadev. Ganesh gets the power to destroy the obstacles in the material world. So Vaishnavas, pure... That is stated, one should begin the worship of Ganesh. We have in Vaishnava temples Ganesh. But if we have particular obstacles in our life, we may worship Nrsimhadev for a specific purpose. Vamanadev for health, and there are so many. You have to see an astrologer to know these things. And as far as all these New Age cures, they're very... we don't know. Even we don't know allopathic cure. The whole medicine field it's very nebulous. We don't know who can say exactly. Ayurveda should be the safest. Should be. But then I've personally had been given Ayurvedic medicines with heavy metals, which I had a terrible reaction to. Not that I stopped taking Ayurvedic treatment, because it is God's given system, but then People can make mistakes also in any system. So it's very tricky, the whole field of medicine, and what to do, and how to solve problems in this world. Ultimately, we have to take shelter of Krishna. Sannyasis shouldn't get into business, money making, big money. Sannyasis can take big money and spend it in the service of Krishna, but it's not sannyasis' job to become involved in businesses and discussing money-making schemes. Srila Prabhupada did once explain to Peter Burwash, the tennis coach, about how to run a business. And Peter Burwash has followed that through his life because Srila Prabhupada had that background. And Srila Prabhupada didn't get involved in the financial matters of the society, but he didn't personally. He gave suggestions to householders how they could run businesses, especially prasadam business, prasadam distribution, restaurants. But he didn't personally get in. Lots of money came to Prabhupada, but he did invest some in fixed deposits, which is a standard thing in India for fixed deposit for the sake of maintaining deity worship. But he didn't, although he had a lot of background in business, a lot of money was coming to him, he didn't try to do business himself to make money. So that's not for sannyasis. And Krishna's money that's coming, donated for Krishna, we shouldn't reinvest it. As stock market speculation, people do make money on the stock market, but a lot of people who don't know what they're doing, they lose it. And people may think they know what they're doing and they lose it also. There may be also some syndrome of I'm in charge, I am the doer, I'm the boss here. Harikesa was very much like that also. He was definitely in charge, and what he said went. And it worked, but we have to be careful about that also. Get a big position is very dangerous. I'm the boss, I'm in charge. Be humble. Never think ourselves more intelligent than Srila Prabhupada. Although we may have to use our intelligence to serve Srila Prabhupada, which doesn't mean to stereotype, follow him, like imitating or just, exactly how to use the intelligence in Srila Prabhupada's service without following like a robot. We have to use our intelligence also how to serve him, but we should understand his plans, his directions. We should follow them. Don't ever blaspheme Srila Prabhupada. There's some lessons. There could be so many more. We're all in a dangerous position. It's very dangerous, the whole material world. I'm also in a dangerous position. Accepting disciples, but at the same time I always have to pray for the mercy of Hari, Guru and Vaishnavas. Otherwise we're lost. If I think I'm a Guru, I'm giving mercy, I'm giving out special mercy to others. Very dangerous if we think we're the doer. So many, many things can be learned. Will such things happen again in future in ISKCON, in the religious life? Yes, it will. In ISKCON and all religious organizations, there have been chaotic conditions caused by misbehavior of leaders. Luther wanted to cut out any leadership. He himself became a leader by doing so. Something like Ritvikism in the Christian faith several centuries before. There have to be leaders, but leaders are leaders by being followers. Harikesa understood that principle. Something went terribly wrong. Hare Krishna. Vancha kalpatarubhascha kripa sindhu patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Dante nitaya churnakang padiyani patya etadaham bravimi. Hey sadhava sakala eva vihaya durad goranga chandra charne kurjana raga. Parivadata jano yatatata va nanu mukaro na vayam vicharayamaha. Hari rasa madira madati mata bhuvi vilutama nartama nirvishama. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna.